everybody, thanks for joining me again. This is the second part of our 1/72 scale new tool Airfix Vulcan build. In the first part I built the nose section and fitted the cockpit inside. Since the end of the video I've done a little bit more work where we'll go back to the bench and I'll show you that in a bit more detail just to show you what I've done since part one. But then we'll move on quickly in this video to building the wheelbays, Bombay and fitting those into the lower wing panels. So let's have a quick look at what we've done with the nose section and then we'll get on with the rest of the build. Okay, so this is the nose section finished. You can see that I've dealt with all the seam lines here on the two fuselage halves. Just a coat of Mr. Surfacer just to check that those seams have disappeared, which they have. It was a little bit tricky around the back here where we've got this little vent, but just some careful work with some very fine sandpaper sorted that out. On the underside it was a little bit more difficult because you remember that there was a problem with the fit of this panel underneath with the entrance hatch. It didn't quite go together as I'd hoped, especially at the front here, so that needed quite a bit of work. And again, the Mr. Surfacer's just checking for how that's come out. I've reinstated this panel line along the join of the underside panel and continued the panel line along the front of the bomb aimer's window. You'll notice that I've masked off all the openings, including these spaces here for the pitot tubes, and that's to prevent any sanding debris getting inside. It will easily be possible to get debris entering through these spaces here and straight onto the window, and you can get in with a cotton bud to clean it, but it's just as well to blank things off so you don't get any dust inside. So the pitot locations have been filled with some blue tack. The underside access door openings been masked off, the cockpit, and I've also masked off the little windows here just to prevent any overspray getting onto them. You can see that I've fitted the appropriate nose cone for the build that I'm doing. I've decided on XL392, which was a 617 squadron machine, and that's just because I happen to have a set of 1/72 scale 617 squadron extra decals, which includes a Vulcan on it, XL392. So that's the one that I'm doing. XL392 carried the in-flight refueling probe and the terrain following radar pimple at the front as well. So that's the correct nose cone from the Airfix kit. They do offer options to build more or less any nose configuration that you want to do. The slight difficulty with the nose cone is that it would give you a seam line somewhere around this point, which didn't exist, so that's all been filled and a new panel line scribed in here. This panel underneath, you can see I've filled the centre line, but I've also filled the seam line formed by the nose cone. That wasn't present. This whole panel actually dropped off, and certainly when I worked on the aircraft in major servicing, this panel was removed for the majority of the time that the aircraft was in the hangar, and it just dropped off in one piece. So a little bit of work to do around these seams. You have to fill the panel line formed by the nose cone and reinstate this continuous line here along the nose cone and the original fuselage part. Those panel lines were scribed using a very fine saw. I like this one with the curved edge on it, which it's possible just to run into the groove and clean it all out. And along the front here where you want to extend and match the panel lines, these sort of saws enable you to just run along and get a nice straight line. All of these panel lines have been tested for finish using some thinned down Mr. Surfacer sprayed on with the airbrush, and that just makes sure that you've got these panel lines nice and equalised and ready to go. So that's the nose section finished for the time being. I'm not going to do any more with that, probably until it's fitted to the main part of the aircraft. So I'm going to put that safely to one side now, and we can get the parts out for the rest of the build, which will start with the Bombay Elements. Okay, we're on to section 23 now. So moving along, we're going to start with these enormous beams which ran across the Bombay. And I'm going to be building this in the normal configuration, so not with the blue steel option. So I don't need to make any of these modifications that Airfix call out in the instructions. I'll just be building this as a standard bomber version. So I'll get these parts out and we'll put those together first. I'll also take out these parts, which are the sidewalls for the Bombay and the front and aft bulkheads, just to test for fit. I'm going to go ahead and fit the Bombay main structure together. That is to say, the outside structure. The beams that I've just mentioned will fit inside of that in a moment. So that assembly comes together fairly easily. So I'm going to get that glued up and square it off on the mat. And then the beams go across into these little slots. So there are 5, I think, to fit in. But I'm going to paint this element separately from the beams. I have difficulty getting the airbrush into all those nooks and crannies, and I just find it easier to paint the parts separately and then assemble them afterwards. That's just my way of doing it. I think a lot of people would assemble the whole Bombay and then just paint it in one go, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently to that. Let's get these sides put together. I'm using some Tamiya extra thin quick setting for this. So using cement on the outside. I'll clamp all this up in a moment, but I just want to get the 4 sides in place first. I just want to make sure that these top pieces here, the top of the Bombay at the front end, is pinched together. It's not in a slot as such, it's just braced onto the side. So I'll just put that clamp on there. This is a burner clamp, just to hold that top piece in, and I can then put a little bit more glue on that just to make sure that it's a really strong joint, and the same with the back. And then just make sure that that's square and leave that to set up for a few minutes. That's set up now, so I can just remove that clamp. I'll just put it to one side while we'll build the cross beams. I'm going to do these in order just because I don't want to mix these parts up. As you can see, they look quite similar on the sprue. They are numbered actually on the inside face, which is helpful. Got to be very careful to get these pieces in the right place. They're very easy to mix up. The sprue gates on these inner radiuses here are a bit more tricky than the others to clean up. I'm just using some micro mesh, coarse micro mesh, wrapped around a knife handle, so you don't get any flats anywhere on it. So these are all the cross members for the Bombay. I'll just test fit those now, just to make sure that they're going to go in okay and the Bombay is going to remain square. These cross members will only fit one way and in one position, and they're obviously designed to match the angle of the Bombay roof, and this is where the Airfix numbers come in useful. Just to finish these off, I'll just put a little bit of filler around these join seams here, just to make sure that they're absolutely clean. So each of those cross members has been treated to some Mr. Surfacer. It's my favourite filler for very fine hairline cracks. So just leave that to dry and then can come back and sand that out. Should get a nice flat surface for them. Whilst I'm waiting for these cross members to dry, the filler to dry, I'm going to set about starting to construct the internal structures for the wings. These wings on the Airfix kit are very large on a Vulcan, and they do need these supports. I think it was one of the failings of the original issue Airfix kit that the wings were very difficult to align, and hopefully this internal structure, which is quite substantial, will eliminate that problem and help us to get the wings aligned properly. So we'll cut those parts out and we'll start to install them on the framework that we've already got in place. I don't think this seam line and these sprue gates will interfere with the fit, but I'm not going to take any chances, and I'll get rid of those and smooth this, what's effectively a wing spar. And I think that they fairly well replicate the spars on the actual aircraft, in that there was a main and after spar. I think I might be wrong about that. I wasn't an airframe fitter. But it was one of the best days of the servicing programme when we were all given a day off because the main spars were being x-rayed, and obviously we couldn't be in the hangar at the time. So we just got a day's leave, which is all very nice. I don't recall any aircraft being condemned because of the condition of the spars, but I might be wrong. Some of them may have done. They were approaching the end of the life at that point in time, and obviously the main spars were pretty important. Just an example where you've got to be careful. I took the wrong spar off the sprue, nearly got them mixed up. I don't think I'd have been able to fit it the wrong way around. It just wouldn't go, I don't think. But anyway, it's a reason why I only do these assemblies one at a time, to avoid mixing parts up. I'll start off with the join here where the spar joins the Bombay side, and it's quite a positive fit. So you can see that end piece goes in really positively. That's a nice piece of engineering from Airfix. While that's drying, I just loosely fit those central cross pieces, and I'll also make sure that they are aligned with the location points on the lower wings. This connection here on the end of the spar just needs flattening off, because that sits in this 90-degree angle here, and if you don't flatten it off, it's not going to go in there properly, and it'll lead to a gap on the center section because it's going to be too far inboard. So I think it's just worth cleaning that up, making sure that it's absolutely flat. So I'm going to get some glue on that on the inside anyway. Okay, this appears to have set up all right. It's nice and tight on the joints. So we need to sort out these centerline joints now. I've left those unglued at this stage. I'm going to start by running round the side of the Bombay because that's not glued yet. I'll deal with this front join first of all, leave the back one for the moment. That appears to have gone together all right. Some nice tight joints at the bottom. So I'll leave that to set properly. I'm not going to touch that for a while. And then I'm going to go back to the Bombay cross members and clean those up now. Okay, they're the Bombay cross members, all cleaned up, ready for priming and a coat of paint. I'll be painting these separately from the actual Bombay in the wings there that we fitted earlier, and that's just because there are spaces in the Bombay that just won't be accessible from below if we assembled it all together. So I'll be giving these a coat of black on the insides particularly, just to make sure that they're nice and shaded, and then I'll fit them together with the painted interior of the Bombay. So hopefully they'll come out all right. The next thing I want to look at is the wheelbase. This is the parts for the nose wheelbase, the 4 sides and a roof. The way I'm going to approach this is to just build the sides and leave the roof separate. And that's again for the same reason of being able to get in with the airbrush to paint all these areas. If I put the roof on at this stage and just assemble it as an open box, it's not going to be possible really to get paint all the way under this undercut detail. So that's why I'm doing it the way I am doing. I'll use the roof as a guide to make sure that the parts are all squared up. Just make sure that we've got these right. They'll only fit one way actually. It's not possible to assemble them the wrong way around. At least I hope not. Just let that dry a little bit. Make sure there's no glue on the underside, because as I said, I don't want to cement it to the roof at this stage. There's nothing on there, so I can just place that in position just to make sure that it's all squared up, and I'll let that set, and then when it's all glued together I can just lift it off and paint the two parts separately. So I'll just leave that to dry whilst I cut the parts out for the main gear bays. So do the main gear bays now. This is one of them. I think this is the port side one. Yeah. And again, I'm going to do this in sections so I can paint it properly. So I've glued the aft bulkhead in place with the actuating jack fitted, and I'll leave the two sides and paint those separately. So I'll just prepare the starboard one as well. Okay, so they're the three wheel bays. I can't fit the main gear bays, but I will fit the nose gear bay at this stage without its roof. And there is a difficulty with this. I've test fitted it already, and when it's in its correct position, there's a gap at the back face on the back bulkhead. So I'm just going to fill that with some 0.01 plastic strip and just lay that at the back of the opening like that, and it's just enough to help pack the gap out. So I've just got this little strip which I'll put just at the back of the bay. I'll actually put some on the plastic strip as well. It'll just help to soften it, and it'll just conform a bit more easily. So that little filler has done the trick when the gear bay fits in, which it does. It sits on these ribs. So basically this plastic card filler that I've put in acts just like these flat ribs here to support the gear bay in place, like so. And from the underside we've just got a flush joint at the bottom. The front is not a problem, that fits in fine. I'll just smooth that packing strip out. I'll just get right the way into this corner with a triangular file. And that's a gap-free join now. So I'll assemble that bay as it is. I'll leave the roof off, as I said. That will enable me to paint the bay from above. It's a good fit all the way around. So I'm happy with how that's come out. Let's get it glued in. That's the nose gear bay fitted. Nice and strong. There's quite a bit of weight obviously on the nose gear with the 40 gram weight in the front there. So it's important that we get a good fixing for this. And especially when I put the roof on, so this part, I'll reinforce it around the edges because obviously the leg will want to push up and push that out of position if it's not fixed properly. So those are the interior parts all prepared. We've got the wings assembled, or the lower wings assembled, with the Bombay sides. We have the 5 Bombay cross members all ready to paint up, and we've got the main gear bays here ready to paint, and as we've seen, the nose wheel bay also partially assembled. So I'm happy with how that's turned out. I want to get the relevant parts primed now, but before I do that I just want to sort these seams out on the underside, and I'll do that using some sprue goo. That's because I don't want the lines to appear again afterwards, so that'll get treated with sprue goo and left for a couple of days to fully set before I come to sand those parts down. I've just got a little bit of glue squeezing out of there, which I can get rid of now. I'm just going to run a piece of masking tape alongside these circular panels on the underside, just to cover those up. I don't want to have to reinstate those really. Okay, so that'll do the job. I'll let that fully harden. Just get a bit on the inside. Okay, so that's the assembly stages done. I'll just go over to the spray booth and get these primed up, and then we can think about getting them in a coat of paint. I just want to check the seam work now, just here and on the tail here, and then I can go in and prime the Bombay as well and the nose wheel bay. Okay, so that's all the interior primed up, and that allows us to just check for the joints. Okay, so this seam's come out pretty well. The masking tape that I ran along to protect these circles has worked alright. The seams disappeared and I've kept the circles, little access panels actually. And the same at the back, I've had to rescribe this panel line here for this hatch. So that's all going to look fine under a coat of paint. Happy with that. And the Bombays come out nice as well in primer. So I'll let that dry off. It's very warm in the shed today, and I'm a bit reluctant to paint while it's so hot. All these Bombay beams have had a second coat and another rub down, so hopefully the seams will have disappeared by now. These are the main gear bay roof and aft bulkhead. Okay, so I think that's come out all right. We've lost the join seam lines on the bottom where we've put the two wing halves together and reinstated the panel lines there. It's nice and smooth. Here where I masked off these little circular access panels, that's worked and saved them, so they've not got filled in. The nose gear bay has come out really well. It's a nice firm fixing for later on when it takes the weight of the nose with all the counterbalance in there. So it was important that we got a really good fixing with that. The little seam problem that we had at the back has been closed in with that strip of plastic card. I think it was 0.02 plastic card. So that's all worked well, and the Bombay is ready for a coat of paint as well. The beams have also been cleaned up, so we've lost the seam around the edge there. Now that it's been primed, you can't see that join anymore. And I hope the method for painting the wheelbase will work. You can see there that on this partially assembled one, this is just dry fitted. You can see how difficult it would be to get paint underneath this actuator. Having these parts separate and painting them separately hopefully will pay dividends. We'll see. So as I said, I'm going to leave that because it's too warm in the shed at the moment to do any painting. I'm just worried that I'll get the paint drying before it hits the surface, and that'll leave nasty grainy paint on all this, and it'll take an awful lot of cleaning up. So I don't want to risk that. I'll wait until it's cooler this evening to put the paint on. And what I'm going to do is use a very dark grey, either a German grey or maybe a rubber black, something like that, to start off with as another primer. And then I'll overspray that with the white. I'll use lacquer paints in both cases for the black and the white. And hopefully doing that will give some effect of shadow around all these boxes and all this detail. So hopefully that will work. So that's it. I'm going to leave it there for the time being for this episode. I'll come back when I've done that painting of the Bombay and the wheelbase, when I've done, probably on Saturday or Sunday this weekend, and I'll just put a quick video up to show you how that's gone. So I hope there are plenty of you out there also building this new Vulcan. It's a lovely kit, it's going together really well so far, and hope you can follow along with this build. But I'll close this one for the moment and hopefully see you next time when we've done that painting work. So bye for now, everybody.